Hello Whisky fans, welcome back. It's all starting to get a little bit serious now because it's now December the 18th, Christmas is well and truly on its way, and we don't have many drams left in our Whisky Advent calendar. So if anything is going to take the place of the Highland Park Valfather, better hurry up and do it soon. Let's see what we've got today. And this is another whisky that I've never heard of. Uncle Nearest 1856 Premium Whisky, and that's whisky with an E. It's also whisky bottled at 50% ABV, so I literally have no idea what this is. Based on the name alone, and the fact that whisky's got an E in it, I'm going to guess that this is a bourbon, although could be Canadian, but I really don't know. No idea what to expect with this one. Looking at the colour of it, I would say that is probably a bourbon. Looks like a typical bourbon colour to me, but I'm kind of going in blind with this one, so it should be interesting. So just nosing that from the bottle, as is customary apparently, I'm going to say that does smell like a particularly good bourbon with quite a lot of rye in the mash bill. But I could be completely wrong. Wouldn't be the first time. Let's get it in the glass and have a proper nose. So from the nose, I'm definitely going to put this out there and say that I think this is a bourbon. Like I said when I was nosing from the bottle, I think this is a bourbon with quite a bit of rye. On the nose, I'm getting this big hit of sweet, sweet corn syrup. Quite a bit of wood spice mixing in with what I think is rye. A fair bit of vanilla. And also some of that trademark earthy grassiness that I always find when I'm nosing something that is either a rye whisky or has a lot of rye in it. So I'm quite committed now. If I'm wrong about this and there's no rye at all, that's a little bit embarrassing, but that's kind of the risk that you take when you nose and taste things blind. It'd be even more embarrassing if this turns out to be Scotch, but I really don't think it is. Let's see how it tastes. Yeah, so I really do think this is a really good bourbon. This is the sort of bourbon that's really to my liking. You're getting lots of full, sweet, syrupy notes, both on the palate, and the mouthfeel itself is particularly full and syrupy. Some really nice oak spice. I've probably said before that I don't generally appreciate lots of spiciness or raw oak notes in my whisky, but what they've done with this one works really well. And also there's some notes of earthy peanut brittle in there as well. It essentially reminds me quite a bit of a slightly spicier Jack Daniel's single barrel, which I think is one of the whiskies that I've reviewed fairly recently. I would probably say that Jack Daniel's Single Barrel, if money isn't being taken into consideration, is my go-to recommendation for a widely available, really good bourbon or American whiskey. Just have a little bit more and I'll look at what we've got on the finish. Yeah, that really is my kind of bourbon. Quite like that one. I'll have to do a little bit of research after this, because I'm really interested to find out what this actually is, and B, I want to know how much it is, because if it's not too expensive, I would probably see myself buying a bottle of this. As for the finish, I'm going to say medium long, at least medium long, and lots of sweet syrup and dry, spicy oakiness. So I'm just going to finish what I've got in the glass here, and I'll do a little bit of research. If anyone's wondering what my research tool of choice is, it's nothing top secret and special. I'm basically just searching on Master of Malt, because most things are on there, and you get a brief description of what it is and a price. So it is American whiskey, so I've dodged that bullet, haven't guessed completely wrong. So it appears to be its own distillery, or is it not a distillery? You have to be a little bit careful with some American whiskey distilleries, because some of them are brands and labels rather than actual distilleries. It tends not to be as clear whether what is on the label of bourbon or an American whiskey is actually where it's produced, or if it's just a brand that they've come up with. Whereas with Scotch, there's laws that govern more closely what you're allowed to put on the label. So with Scotch, it's usually a little bit easier to tell if the name on the label is where it's come from or if it's a mystery malt. With bourbon, it's not always that easy. So it seems to me, from what I'm reading here, that Uncle Nearest is a distillery, but it's a new distillery in Tennessee, which isn't producing its own whiskey yet. So it seems that what they're saying is that the Uncle Nearest at the moment is a new distillery selling sourced whiskies. And for anyone interested in the backstory, because that is a wonderful name, Uncle Nearest was the nickname of the former slave and African-American Nathan Green, who actually taught Jack Daniel how to distill. So the fact that they've chosen to name this distillery after him and commemorate him and his life may or may not be a good thing, depending on what your views on Jack Daniel's whiskey is. But that is actually making a lot of sense, because if it is a sourced whiskey, that I'm reading things here that say that it's possibly a blend of different sourced whiskies, and if that is the case, I would say that this reminds me a hell of a lot of Jack Daniel's Single Barrel. So it probably is Jack Daniel's bourbon bottled at 50%, as the Single Barrel from Jack Daniel's is, and if it is blended with something else, I would guess possibly something from MGP Indiana, some sort of rye whiskey has been put in there. That would be my guess anyway. Let me know in the comments what you think of this and what you think it actually is. The other thing that I was really interested in is the price. And on Master of Malt, at least, we've got a price of £55 per bottle. So that's not cheap. And it's probably even a little bit more expensive than the Jack Daniel Single Barrel. So I'm changing my mind whether or not I might actually buy a bottle of this, because the Jack Daniel Single Barrel, I'm hoping that in the run up to Christmas we're going to see that on offer here in the UK, and I have actually picked that up for around £25 a bottle before, and if that's the case, that's a hell of a lot better bargain than paying £55 for this. Although in terms of sheer quality, I would say that this one is up there, equal quality to the Jack Daniel Single Barrel. So if you're tasting this today in the Whisky Advent Calendar and you like it, I would really recommend that you check out Jack Daniel Single Barrel if you can find it for a good price. As for putting Uncle Nearest on the leaderboard, that's going to be a little bit tricky, because we're starting to get a little bit cluttered now. There's a lot to compare it to. What other American whiskies do we actually have up there? I'm sure there's some, isn't there? Well, the Whistle Pig is a North American whiskey, but I don't think Uncle Nearest is quite up to Whistle Pig standards. I don't think it's going to beat the Aerolite Lindsay. I'm thinking around here somewhere, around about the Darkness 8-year-old or the Balvenie. Yeah, I think I'm going to have to move the Glenfiddich down a touch. Glenfiddich can go down there, and the Uncle Nearest is going to slot in just above it. So we've now got Aerolite Lindsay, Uncle Nearest, Glenfiddich IPA, and then the Balvenie 14. So that's kind of surprising, because I say myself all the time that I'm not really a bourbon drinker. I do really prefer Scotch, but we've got two North American whiskies in the top 10 there, so Master of Malt have obviously picked some good ones for us. So I think that's about all there is to say about the Uncle Nearest. I'm going to go off and enjoy the rest of this properly now. Join me tomorrow and we'll see if there's any more surprises to be had in the Whisky Advent Calendar. Cheers.